Hi everyone, I am doing something a little different today. I am doing a kind of a vlog, I guess. I just wanted to give you a rundown of me, my life, how I came to be where I am today as a illustrator and surface pattern designer. I'm going to take you through the sort of timeline of where I started and how I got to where I am today. So growing up, I was very much into ballet, and that's where I thought my focus would be as an adult. I thought I would become a professional dancer. I wasn't too bad at ballet. I won a scholarship when I was 15 to go to the Australian Ballet School, and I ended up training there for the 3 years. And unfortunately, at the end of my time there, I had a small stint with the Australian Ballet Company, but I ended up with a really bad foot injury that pretty much wiped my career off my journey path. So I ended up coming back to New Zealand for a year and trying to work out what on earth I was going to do with my life. It was a bit of a soul destroying time. You know, I had worked really hard for this career. And sorry, now the plane is going over, so we might get a few of them, but hopefully not too bad. Yeah, it was a pretty bad time in my life. I was pretty down in the dumps about my life and where it was going and what I was going to do. So when I was back there in New Zealand, I decided I was really missing my friends in Australia. So I decided to quit my little job that I had found here and move back to Australia. And so I had about $300 in my wallet. This was 1995. It wasn't going to last me long, but probably a lot longer than it would today. But I got on a plane, went back to Melbourne in Australia, and I stayed with a friend, and I found a job as a PA, and I worked there for quite some time. I actually really enjoyed it. It was a lingerie company actually, and we did lots of fun, exciting things. We would go into like all the big stores like Maya and David Jones. We would do fashion shows. Yeah, it was pretty cool, but obviously wasn't really what I wanted to do with my life. I've always been quite ambitious, and I was still trying to work out what could I do. I ended up moving to Sydney. I got another PA job with a sort of civil engineering company. And while I was there, I started playing around on their computer system. I've always loved computers. If you go back to when I was sort of maybe 10, 11 or 12, I can't really remember, my parents bought us a Commodore 64 computer, and I remember getting the magazines from the newsagent, and they'd have pages and pages of code that you could copy out onto the computer, and then at the end of it, if you hadn't made any mistakes, if you hadn't missed a semicolon or whatever, you'd have a fully functioning game. And obviously the games back in the 90s are a little bit different to how they are now. Coding back in the 90s was a lot different to what it is now. But I think actually that was the 80s, not the 90s, the 80s. Yeah, and so I think that kind of taught me a lot about computers. So I was kind of teaching myself how to code without really knowing it. And so when I was working for this company in Sydney, I started dabbling with their databases, and they didn't really have any systems on there, but I kind of discovered that I could build them a system. And so I asked the manager, and I said, oh look, I reckon I could build you guys a system that will help manage your staff, your workers who go out and they do these jobs on these work sites and stuff. And he was like, oh, okay, yeah, you can do that in your downtime. I don't think he really expected much, but over the next few months, I created them this fully fledged management system that tracked everything, and they were kind of blown away. And I was like, wow, actually this is really fun. I quite enjoyed it. Maybe I should pursue that. So I ended up signing up to TAFE, where I did a 1-year diploma course in IT. And I remember sitting there in the class, and they were teaching us basically, hello world, which is what you learn when you first learn coding. And everyone was struggling, and I literally was sitting there, I'd done it, and I said, oh, Is there anything else we can learn? And I ended up teaching most of the class how to code, basically. So I thought, okay, I need to go a bit higher than this. I was also buying magazines at the time and teaching myself, and so I signed up for an IT degree. And also at about the same time, I got another PA job for a very big corporation in Sydney. And it was the position, I was a PA for the IT director. So I was right in with IT people, software engineers, project managers, all that kind of stuff. And he discovered that I was doing the IT degree, and so he decided, this is the IT director, he decided that the company would sponsor me for that, and they would help mentor me and help me to get that sort of position excuse me, in the company. So over the next few years, I went from being a PA to a software engineer in this very large corporation. And we did some pretty impressive projects. I remember one project in particular. We worked with a German company who were engineers to build like the first distribution warehouse in Australia, which was fully automated. So that was really fun. Being a part of that and creating the software and working on that was pretty fun. Anyway, over the years that I worked for that company, I still hadn't found my joy, I guess. I hadn't found the thing that really made me sort of passionate about what I was doing. And I thought, oh, maybe it's because I'm missing that creative outlet, that, maybe I need to be back on the stage, maybe I need to be doing something that's creative, because that's where I had my joy in the past. So I ended up resigning from that company, and because I wanted to pursue some acting, I wanted to get back on the stage in the theatre. So I quit, and I actually ended up going freelance and working contract work, as well as doing some acting work. So I was doing some training in acting, but also getting jobs on commercials and TV shows and doing theatre in Sydney. But I was also doing that at the same time as working for myself as a software engineer for a bunch of companies around Sydney. And I was doing that for quite some time. And then my partner and I decided to move out of Sydney to the country. So we really love the Southern Highlands, and that is just sort of an hour and a half out of Sydney, and it's beautiful country, lots of wineries, really beautiful. So we bought a house out there, and I got pregnant. It was the same year I got pregnant that we bought the house. And I then started struggling with all the driving to and from Sydney. In the second half of my pregnancy in particular, it was pretty hard being in a car, sometimes for up to 3 hours in peak hour traffic, going back and forth from Sydney. I listened to a lot of audiobooks back then. It was, when you're sitting in the car for that long, but being heavily pregnant and doing that and then working in a stressful environment was not good for me and not good for my mental health or my physical health. So I ended up having to sort of say, I can't keep coming into the city, I'm going to work from home. So I sort of started doing that instead, and then of course I went on maternity leave. But it was also around this time that I was thinking, I love sewing, so I was like, oh, I want to make some baby clothes for my baby that's coming. And I went looking for some gender neutral fabric, and I could not find anything I liked anywhere. So I went back to my computer and I typed in how to create your own fabric, and Spoonflower popped up, and I was like, oh, wow, okay, I could actually create my own fabric or design my own fabric, print it out, and then make the baby clothes. So I went about learning how to do that, and I did it. And I was lucky in that I had been using Photoshop and Adobe Illustrator for years, because I'd done a lot of graphic design work with my software engineering work. So I already knew those software platforms really well, and I just didn't know how to create patterns. So I taught myself how to create patterns. I was uploading them to Spoonflower. I started getting in the sort of top 10 of some of their challenges, and I was like, oh, this is really cool. I got fabric printed. I even started selling some of the baby clothes at a local store. and I was like, oh, maybe I could actually create a business out of this. And you know, at this point, I had my own business. I knew how to run a business. I just didn't love what I was doing in that business. So I thought, I'm going to just keep plugging away at the pattern design and see where that goes. I ended up applying for a scholarship at the Make It in Design team. They ran an online course back then, and I ended up winning that. So I ended up doing this amazing course, and that kind of catapulted the start of my career. That's kind of where I got my foot in the door. I learned how to create patterns and obviously collections, and I managed to build a portfolio. So at the end of that, I got an agent. And the reason I got an agent is because around that time, I had been posting on Instagram, and I had a company reach out to me, a shoe company in Melbourne, and they wanted to license a couple of designs. And at this point, I had no idea how to license. I had only been earning a little bit of money on Spoonflower. When I say a little bit, I mean like $100, $200 for the whole year, like nothing. And so when this company reached out to me, I was like, oh, how do I do this? How do I navigate this? How do I write a contract? How do I set the price? How do I, you know, all these things I didn't have a clue about, and I really stumbled. I made a lot of mistakes. The shoes ended up being amazing. They looked amazing. They were lovely to work with, but I hadn't set any sort of rules about how many iterations of designs I was going to do, any of that sort of stuff. So it was difficult, but we got there in the end. The shoes were lovely. But it was at that point I was like, I need to learn more about the licensing side of this business. So I got an agent, and having the agent really helped me understand contracts, licenses, royalties, all that kind of stuff, how to deal with clients, negotiating, all that kind of stuff. So having that agent was really handy. It took me 2 or 3 years to actually start earning a decent amount of money through my agent as well. Like, it wasn't like I started getting lots of jobs or commissions straight away. The first couple of years, I probably only earned, you know, $1,000 to $2,000 from them. So at this point, I was also doing my contracting work as an software engineer. So I had that income, and it didn't matter so much, but I really wanted to build up, you know, the illustration work. So I was also then, you know, juggling parenthood. So I was full-time parent. I had another child, I had a daughter, and my partner worked full-time. So I didn't have a lot of time to put a lot of effort into it. I was also doing, you know, part-time contract work. So it was a huge juggle. But over time, I could see that I was going in the right direction, even though it was slow. So in 2018, we decided to move from Australia back to New Zealand. So I had been away from New Zealand at this point 27 years. I've been living in Australia. I was an Australian at that point, so I'm now a dual citizen. But we decided to move back to New Zealand. My parents were getting older. My dad in particular had some health issues, and I really wanted my kids to spend some time with them. So we packed up our house, we rented it out, we moved back to New Zealand and set up our house here. And that was probably one of the hardest years of my career. It was tough. My partner had to take a huge cut in income, and even though she was working the same sort of full-time hours, her income was about a quarter of what she was earning in Australia. And obviously I was looking after a 4-year-old and an 18-month-old, plus trying to have some sort of business. And I was also quite ill at the time. I had some mysterious illness, and I'd been to every specialist on the planet, it felt like, trying to work out what was wrong with me. And I had no energy. I had chronic fatigue. I was having trouble walking. I was even having trouble talking. At one point, the doctors thought I had MS. It was all very similar symptoms. It took them about 3 years to work it out. All I had was a B12 deficiency, and so now I just have jabs and I'm all better again. But it was pretty bad. Like the symptoms I was having were pretty horrendous, and it was that year that We weren't earning very much money. We were just staying afloat. It was very stressful, but we made it through. I think also at that time I was like, oh, I'm just going to have to give up this dream because I, wasn't making a lot of money. I didn't have time to do a lot of work. And I was like, I'm just going to have to put the kids into daycare and I'm just going to have to find another job. So I even started applying for random jobs. Some were in IT, some were just, I remember applying for a job at the library, that, the job where you drive around the books to other libraries, like just as a driver. And I could not get an interview for any job that I applied for, which for me was quite demoralizing because in Australia, every time I applied for a job, I basically got it. I got every job that I applied for. It was so weird. And then all of a sudden, I was applying for 10 jobs and I wouldn't even get one interview. So it was quite, a kick in the guts, really. So at that point I was like, well, I'm just going to have to make this art thing, this illustration business work. I had no choice. So I put my all into it. And over the next couple of years, I really saw it grow. And I think in 2022, when, the world kind of stopped, I guess, I think that's when I realized that I was doing it. I was full-time. I was making more money than I ever made in my IT work. I was getting book commissions. I was earning royalties from licenses. I was getting licenses. I was getting print on demand. Like my Spoonflower went crazy during that time. I think everyone was making masks and everyone was getting into their craft, and it was actually, despite it being a hard year because of the obvious, it was actually the start of a good, a good number of years for me financially and business-wise. It was when I realized that, I am actually a full-time artist now. And then that kind of just built up to where I am today. And over the past sort of 4 or 5 years, I have done this solely. I haven't done any IT work. I have tried to do 1 or 2 children's books a year. I try and get, as many licenses as I can each month. I have regular clients that I license to. I get royalties every quarter from a wide range of licenses and companies that I have worked with. I'm also getting income from teaching. I have my own online course. I have my own online community, and also, YouTube. YouTube I don't get a lot of money from, but I love it because I get to connect with people and provide my learnings, my knowledge to people that probably can't afford to take those big courses, and that makes me really happy that I can do that, because I kind of wish I had that back in the beginning, and I kind of wish, some of the mistakes that I made, I may not have made if I had had someone like myself giving this information for free on YouTube back when I started out. So I guess looking back, there are a few things that I've learned, and one of them is to embrace the detours. And I'm getting lots of planes going over, so hopefully they're not too loud. I live under a flight path, so it's a bit annoying. But anyway, yes, embrace the detours. My path wasn't linear at all. I mean, I went from ballet to software engineering, acting. I had a number of jobs before I ended up doing this, and I think this is where I will be for the rest of my working career and even beyond. But I embraced the detours as I went. There were, changes, and I've kind of taken skills from those previous careers into this one, and I think they've really helped. Like having perseverance. Perseverance really is key. You've got to be persistent. You've got to have that kind of work ethic and business mind to make it work. And I think I got that from being a ballet dancer, and I think I got that from working in IT. And it's helped me to have a work ethic and a determination and perseverance and a stubbornness, I think, as well, to be able to make this work. Another thing that I learned is to really diversify your income. Having your income just in one bucket is pretty much setting yourself up for disaster, because if that bucket goes, then your business is gone. Having multiple buckets of income really does help. It allows you to, if one falls out, then you've got another one to keep you going. And that has definitely happened to me over the years. So I try to focus on about 3 or 4 buckets or income areas. And I make sure they are areas that I am earning money and I am passionate about, and that I can see a future in, I guess. I also recommend not underestimating the power of community. And when I say community, I'm not only talking about sort of physical communities like the people around you, but also the online community. Social media can be a bit of a love-hate relationship, but I do love the communities on social media that I am a part of, because they have provided me with support and feedback, and I also am able to give other people support and feedback in those communities. And I think, I set up my own community because I wanted to be able to provide that support and mentorship to people that want to work in this industry. And I just love having that support and that those people around me that have the same sort of, passions and joy. So it empowers you and makes you feel good about what you're doing, I guess. Another thing is to trust your instincts. Like, listen to your gut. If your gut is saying don't do something, don't do it. If it's saying, yeah, maybe give it a go, I would go for it. Sometimes I'm not good at this. Sometimes I listen to my brain and not my gut, and I need to listen to my gut more. When I listen to my brain, it sort of takes over, and that's when I make mistakes. So yeah, listen to your gut. It's a good indicator of whether you should do something or not do it, or if you feel something's right or not right. Yeah, definitely listen to your gut. But finally, the biggest thing is find your joy. If this is something that you find joy in, you are passionate about, then I think it's something that you can't fail at, and you're going to have, if you find joy in it, you're going to have the perseverance and the stubbornness to just make it work and work hard at it, and invest in the education and the skills that you need to build to make it work. And yeah, you can only do that when you have that absolute passion and joy for it. So yeah, definitely just find your joy in whatever you do, because then you can make it happen, I guess. All right, I think I have come to the end, and thank you for sticking with me, and I hope I have provided you with some sort of inspiration and also insight into how I have gotten to where I am today. Another plane. I'll just wait for that one to go over. If you want to see more videos like this in this sort of format, this is quite new for me, just let me know whether you enjoyed it or not, and if you do, I'll make some more of them. If not, then I'll just stick to the tutorials. Now, if you do want to learn a little bit more about surface pattern design, I have a course called the Art and Joy of Surface Pattern Design, which takes you right through everything from the creative, the technical and the business side of the industry, and you will learn from the very basics right through to very complex patterns, as well as how to approach clients, how to deal with contracts, all that kind of stuff. So check it out, I'll leave the link below. But yeah, hit that subscribe button too, and I will see you in the next video. See ya! Also, don't forget to check out this playlist for more surface pattern design tutorials.